drop and give me 25. I'm the gunny.
It's time for the gunny.
The quarter deck. Lights. Get online right now. You got 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Hello, my bunch of knuckle-dragging, beer-drinking, hard-charging devil dogs. You're listening to The Quarter Deck. I am your host, Miguel, the Gunny Signs.
Get off the bus!
I do solemnly swear. That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And thank you for joining me here on another episode of The Quarter Deck. We're going to continue to move on our discussion and talk more about different types of VA benefits that are out there for all of our veterans and for all of you service members that are about to get out of the service. You need to make sure that you're aware of what benefits you actually earned now that you're about to get out of the service because of everything that you've done for this wonderful, great nation of ours. We're also going to go ahead and move on and continue our story with the reading of the 1st Marine Division in Iraq of 2003. No greater friend, no worst enemy. And we're going to continue to see how the preparation phase is moving on into getting everything in preparation for the troops to actually go into Iraq and liberate the people there. The quarter deck. Getting an education is so important, not only for the active duty service members once they get out of the service, because they want to make themselves more competitive out there in the job market. But when you really think about it, what about the family? They're able to get an education benefit if the service member actually transfers their education benefits from their post 9/11 education benefit to them for them to be able to go to school. But what about those individuals that don't actually qualify for the post 9/11 education benefit and they do have kids or dependents or anything else? Is there really anything out there for them to be able to actually use for them to actually go to school? Now, this is where one of the VA education benefits comes into play. The survivors and dependents education benefits. Okay. Now, when you look at it, how do I find out if I'm also eligible for this benefit? This benefit is also called the Chapter 35 education benefits. Now, for you to determine this thing, so let's say if you're a dependent spouse or a child or a surviving spouse or child of a veteran that maybe passed away while they were in the line of active duty, Chapter 35 benefits or job training through the GML program might be something that you're eligible for you to be able to use. Now, what questions do you got to actually ask yourself to see if you're actually eligible for any of these benefits or anything else for you to use? So if any one of certain descriptions actually qualify to you, then you could qualify for that. Okay, so one of these statements has to be true in order for the dependent to be eligible for the Chapter 35 education benefit. Number one is that the service member died in the line of duty after September 10th of 2001. Or the service member is missing in action or was captured in the line of duty by a hostile force. The member was detained, held by force while on the line of duty by a foreign government or power, or the service member is in the hospital or getting outpatient treatment for a service-connected permanent and total disability and is likely to be discharged for that disability. A service-connected permanent and totally disabled is a disability that's resulting from your service and does not go away. Now, you may be eligible for VA education benefits under Chapter 35 benefits if you are the child or a spouse of a veteran, and one of those descriptions listed is true of the veteran. Now, these are the things that pertain to a veteran. The veteran is permanently and totally disabled due to a service-connected disability, or the veteran died while on active duty, or as a result of a service-connected disability, then that would make you eligible to be able to use the Chapter 35 education benefits. So if any of those things actually pertain to you, or you may think that they actually pertain to you, contact the education benefit for the VA. The worst thing that can happen is that you could call them and they're going to tell you, oh, you're not eligible because of this reason and so forth and everything else. But if you don't ever call, you don't ask, how are you going to know? That's the one thing that we have to understand that we have to do. We have to contact them to see if you're eligible. Now, if you're determined that you're eligible, just like the other education benefits, what can you get from it? You can get education and training, money for tuition to help you pay for that, money for housing, money for books and supplies that they can help you to purchase that. Now, with the Chapter 35 education benefit, it's a little bit different because you're going to be getting a monthly stipend. And that monthly stipend is what you use for all of those things: the training, tuition, housing, and books and supplies. So it's not like the other ones that give you a specific amount just for that in particular, but you will get some of those benefits for you to be able to actually go to school and get your actual training. Now, like any other benefit through the VA, you have to apply for this. You have to apply for the Chapter 35, and va.gov is the go-to website for you to actually go through there and to make sure that you actually apply. Now, there are two main GI Bill programs that are offered for this education program. Okay, I already talked about the Chapter 35, but there is also the Marine Gunnery Sergeant John David Fry Scholarship, or simply the Fry Scholarship. Now, this is for children and spouses of an active duty service member who died in the line of duty on or after September 11th of 2001, or members of the selected reserve who died from a service-connected disability on or after September 2011. Now, you can get more information on va.gov regarding the Fry Scholarship. So if you may be eligible because of some of those criteria that might have occurred, then, contact them, find out if you are, all that stuff. The other one is the Survivors and Dependents Education Assistance Program, or the DEA program. Okay, this is the one that offers education and training to those qualified dependents of veterans who are the permanently and totally disabled because of that service-related condition, or that did die on active duty as a result of that service-related condition. Now, there may be certain circumstances where an individual can actually qualify for both of these programs, but you can only use one of them. You have to pick one that you want to apply for and the one that you want to use. Now, you got to make that decision on your own. Nobody's going to make that decision. And once you make that selection of which one you want to have, you can't switch them. So you can't decide, I'm going to start with this one, and now I'm going to go ahead and get on with that one. So to compare these two, there's a couple of things that you look at. Okay, with the DA program, how are the payments made? For this program, the payments are made in a monthly stipend. Okay, the amount is going to directly be deposited into a checking account, savings accounts, wherever the individual would like those funds to be deposited into. Right now, the current monthly payment for full-time training is $1,298 monthly. Okay, that changes annually and stuff. So you want to go ahead and make sure you check that every month, or every year, to make sure that you understand exactly what that amount is. Now, what is the duration of the benefits for spouses? 20 years from the service member's date of death, if they died on active duty, or 10 years from the date that the VA determines that they qualify, or from the veteran's date of death. Okay, there may be exceptions like everything else. So, take a look at those as well. Now, for the children, for the DEA program, a child can use these benefits between the ages of 18 and 26. Now, there are exceptions for this as well. So that's another question that you could ask. Now, the maximum months of benefits. There's 45 months if the first use of the benefits was before August 1st of 2018. After that, there's 36 months if any of these benefits were used after that date, August 1st of 2018. So the VA kind of decreased it a little bit to match all the other education benefits that the VA currently has. Now, the spouse can get both the DIC and education benefits at the same time. Yes, they can. Okay. Now, what kind of programs are covered under the DEA education benefit? Colleges, business, technical, or vocational training programs. You can do certification tests, apprenticeships programs, on-the-job training programs, tutorial assistance, and even do a work-study program while you're attending school. So there's a lot of things that you can use this program for, and just like any other education benefit that the VA has, you have to apply for it. Okay, so now let's take a look at the Fry Scholarship. Now, with this scholarship, this tuition and fee payment is paid to the school, so it doesn't go directly to the student themselves. The VA will cover the full in-state tuition costs for training at a public school, and up to $26,042.81 per year at a private or foreign school. Now, these amounts change annually. So again, you have to stay current to find out exactly how much they're going to cover. Money for books and supplies are paid to the students. The VA is going to cover up to $1,000 a year, and that's divided up equally among the terms for books and supplies. Monthly housing allowance is also paid to the students, and that's going to be based on the amount of the local basic allowance for housing in the area that the student lives. Now, they're going to get paid at the rate for an E5 or a sergeant with dependents, and that's going to be paid monthly to the individual, and that is tax-free. Okay. Online students, if you decide to go just simply online, you'll get half of the housing national average. Okay, so whatever the national average is currently, you'll receive half of that as long as you are a full-time online student. Now, again, when any of these benefits, if you're not going full-time, it's going to be prorated. So they're going to have certain amounts they give you for a, if you're going more than half-time, three-quarter time, or full-time, for you to be able to get these. Now, for the spouses, they have no time limit for them to use this benefit, okay? But they can lose the education benefit under the Frye Scholarship if they ever decide to remarry. So they have all that time for them to actually use that. Now, for the child, they become eligible, who became eligible before January 1st of 2013. They qualify when they turn 18 years old, and they can use this benefit until they're the age of 33. So they have a good amount of time for them to actually use the Frye Scholarship. Now, a child who became eligible on or after that date of January 1st of 2013, they have no time limit to use this benefit. Okay, so there is no time limit at all whatsoever. The maximum amount of months that they have for this benefit is 36 months, just like any other benefit. And what can you use this program for? Just like everything else that you can use this for is for college, business, technical, vocational training programs. And basically any program that is out there that has been certified by the VA, you can use this education benefit to your advantage to make yourself more competitive and get out there and try to find that occupation, that profession that you want to succeed in. So again, take advantage of all these benefits that the VA has to offer. They're there for you, for your dependents, for any survivors that are out there for you to use, and take advantage of them to be able to get that education that you need so you can make yourself more competitive. Next week, we'll talk about another benefit. So let me know. Let me know on Facebook which benefits you guys are more interested in hearing about, and we'll do some more research on them and talk about them. The Quarter Deck is brought to you by Miguel Science Photography. From the beginning of your family to the first birthday and beyond. Whether it's a retirement or a Marine Corps ball, Miguel Science Photography is there to make memories that will last a lifetime. Miguel Science Photography is a certified veteran-owned business. Contact them at miguelsciencephotography.com.
What we're going to do right here is go back. Way back into time.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to the Quarter Deck with Miguel, the Gunny Science, and I want to take this opportunity to welcome you again to another great episode as we move on into our reading. As we move on to our weekly reading of our book, with the 1st Marine Division in Iraq of 2000. As we move on this week to the reading of our book with the 1st Marine Division in Iraq of 2003, No Greater Friend, No Worst Enemy, we're moving along in our story, and we're starting to find out a lot more of the actual planning, preparation, and everything that took place in order for everything to actually happen in the most easiest way possible for the 1st Marine Division to get into Iraq, liberate the people, and come home. Ultimately, that was the goal. And as a active duty service member, as a Marine in the 1st Marine Division during that time, I can tell you that our planning and preparation phase was long. It seemed like it took forever, but we knew that this was something that we had been training for our whole entire time since we enlisted into the Marine Corps. And that's the purpose. That was the whole purpose of you enlisting, because eventually it's going to happen. There's always some kind of hot place out there in the world somewhere. Something happening, someone trying to get froggy, as I like to put it. They get froggy out there and they try to do things in the world, and they need to get stopped. Somebody needs to go out there and make sure that they're not doing bad things to other individuals. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into talking a little bit more about the actual intelligence planning of everything that has been going on with the 1st Marine Division and the planning phase. So intelligence planning was driven by a recognition of the enemy situation, drove the division's operation, and the G2's synthesis shaped how the enemy situation was perceived. The division would receive intelligence information from a tremendous variety of sources, and it would be a key challenge for the G2 operations section that was headed by Major Tim Oliver, Master Sergeant Jay Joder, and Gunnery Sergeant James Cecil. To convert this information into intelligence, the speed of the division's hope to move meant that there was little time for a paralysis of analysis. The CG's intent was clear, and getting useful synthesized intelligence quickly into the minds of his commanders was the measure of effectiveness. The passion for dissemination of the part of the Colonel Hawkport helped ingrain his mindset across the division's intelligence effort. In September of 2002, the division initiated an Iraqi understudy program. This program was designed to match the officer of the division's staff with each of the Iraqi divisions in core birthplace, tribal affiliation, education, and professional track record for each of these Iraqi commanders, with the hope that the division could better anticipate their actions on the battlefield. The G2 prepared a detailed assessment of the capabilities of each of the Iraqi units to complement the personal information about the commander, and the understudies met regularly to discuss the tactics, capabilities, and likely reactions of their respective Iraqi generals. This program was the initiative way to get into the minds of the commanders faced by the division. The intelligence community had a good handle of the military capabilities of the equipment the enemy possessed, but insight into the moral aspect of the fight was in short supply. Would the enemy commanders turn against Saddam if the division attacked? That was a very good question. I think everybody can simply understand that too. Were they going to surrender if they were put into under attack? And as you're going to see a little bit later, that question is going to be answered. Would RG and the RA units cooperate in the battlefield? Who was likely to fight? And how aggressively? In marked contrast, controlled Iraqi society produced little information on anyone but Saddam Hussein. There was exasperately little data available on Iraqi military commanders. As a result, the effectiveness of the understudy program in the understanding individuals' personalities was a difficult thing to measure. For its efforts, however, the division gained a cadre of officers well schooled in the tactics, techniques, and capabilities of the Iraqi army. The understudy program allowed for concentrated research efforts and a tactical focus on the enemy that might otherwise have been diluted. In execution, many of the Iraqi units in the division had so carefully analyzed seemingly evaporated in the face of the 1st Marine Division's combat power, and the enemy commanders seemingly had little control over the actions of their units. During this period, the G2 was assisted by Colonel Dave Larson of the MCIA, arranged for a former Iraqi general officer now living in the United States. So here we go. Spies, right? Just like it was back in the old days during the Cold War. We had an actual former Iraqi general that now was living in the United States and was willing to help the United States in learning a little bit more about that. Now, the Iraqi general officer was to visit and speak to the understudies, the division staff, and the subordinate staffs. This officer painted a picture of an Iraqi military in serious state of equipment despair. The requirement to use a large portion of the armed forces to maintain internal order left the Iraqi regime without an effective combat reserve. The regime has saturated the army, the RA and the RG, with informants and political officers, creating an environment of distrust that permeated the armed forces. The palpable disgust which the professional military and educated segment of the population held the Saddam Hussein regime could serve as a source of popular support if the division attacked. It was only one of many social dynamics at work. Much to the chagrin of the assembled officers, he advised that an attack using only the western desert corridors to Baghdad, and dismissed out of hand the idea of an attack through the former marsh areas. He did not know, nor was he told, that this was the battle space allocated to the 1st Marine Division. He made repeated references to the instability of the Saddam decision-making process, in which carefully developed plans were disrupted by the irrational and impulsive decisions at inappropriate times. Wow. If you can think about that, he was actually telling the individuals in the meeting the best way to go down there and do that, or it would be makes more sense to go through all those marshes and stuff and everything else when the division had already actually prepared that information themselves. So astonishing that a former general would actually give them the same data, the same information, what they were actually putting together on their own. So this information confirmed much about the division had previously assessed about the Iraqi and its forces. The division tried to use the general's description of the decision environment to help understand what the trigger for chemical weapons employment might be. That was one of the big factors when we were there too. Weapons of mass destruction and chemical warfare that we had to prepare for. So that was a huge thing that the division was planning for. His predictions for the battle nature of the enemy's defenses, rapid collapse of the confronted, if they were confronted directly, corporations by portions of the citizens, and the larger political environment would later prove accurate. At the time, the division accepted his comments as one of the many possible scenarios, possibly bent to influence as well as to inform and continue to plan for a wide range of possibilities. This include the more dangerous assessments from other different sources that were out there as well. By October of 2002, the G2 planning team had developed a more mature picture of the Iraqi military situation. On that, he was decidedly more complex. One of the issues of concern was the importance of the selected elements of the Iraqi southern oil infrastructure. As the division's understanding of this complex system matured, oil specialists began to describe the Rumaila oil fields as a series of interactive nodes. Some of these nodes were more important than others, and were subsequently identified as special targets for the division's operations. The division's own troop-to-task analysis revealed that seizing all of these nodes would quickly drain the combat power of the entire division, and the G2 worked with 1MEF and the CFLCC headquarters to narrow the list of the smallest set of critical nodes possible. Inundation warfare was another issue of concern in the Iraqi battle space. The Iraqis had a well-developed doctrine for the use of water as a weapon, and had done this as a massive scale during the Iran-Iraqi war. They were used water diversions to deny the Iranians avenues of approach. It seemed clear that if the Iraqis were to seriously defend along the limited avenues of approach available to the United States, the inundation warfare would be a natural element of their defense. The Al-Nasiriyah area seemed especially vulnerable to this tactic, as well as the Highway 7 corridor between Nasiriyah and Al-Qut. MCIA's geospatial specialists conducted a detailed assessment to the balance of the alarmist reporting that was being circulated. MCIA sent out a brief team headed by Mr. Jim Hill, who laid out the true nature of the possibilities. His assessment indicated that tactical inundation was likely the use of the local water control infrastructure to deny areas of terrain, but the likelihood of a catastrophic inundation was remote. For example, the large-scale destruction of the dams and the barges to release massive amounts of water into the systems. Modeling worst-case scenarios of the Iraqi 1954 flood, the division identified alternative maneuver options of the Iraqis chose to use water as a weapon. In late October and early November of 2002, the G2 was also able to work with the Marine Corps Systems Command, the MarCorps SysCom, to accomplish the rapid acquisition of laptop computers loaded with the Falcon View software for 3D terrain visualization. You believe that? 3D imagery of the combat space. It's truly, truly amazing how far technology has come. By this proaction, the laptops were fielded down to the battalion level across the division, giving every maneuver commander the capability to fly through his objectives prior to any kind of attack. The G2 also worked with the Marine Corps Warfighting Laboratory to coordinate the deployment of the prototypes of the Dragon Eye UAV system in advance of the formal system fielding. These systems proved very useful in the close fight as they were beholden only to the requirements of the owning maneuver commander and were not co-opted or tasked by higher headquarters. Well, things are actually starting to come into place now. And if you think about it, all these things that were getting put into place made it so much easier for the commanders to be able to actually do a walkthrough of a three-dimensional world of that battle space, so their units would be so very much more prepared to handle any kind of maneuver elements that they would have to get involved in. So next week, we'll go ahead and continue, and we're going to move on into talking about nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare. That was probably by far some of our favorites, because if you can imagine, wearing a gas mask, a mop suit, a thick mop suit, and rubber boots all the time, and having it ready to go and put on in the desert heat of Iraq. But we'll talk more about that next week.
The quarter deck.
Another week, another dollar. As I always like to say, can you believe that July is almost over with and we're already moving on into August? And it's a good thing that we discussed talking about VA education benefits, because the spring semester is about to start. So remember, all of you that are planning on using the benefits that we're talking about, especially the education ones, take advantage of them. Go ahead and get ready to enroll, because the spring time frame is coming to a start, and it takes time for your applications to be processed and get you going, so that way you can start on the first day of class and get that education thing going. It's nothing better than having a lot of information in your brain housing group to make yourself a better rounded individual in the community after you get out of the service. Our book is starting to get more and more interesting, and thank you guys for joining me and following along on the story that we're sharing, especially for all of us that lived through that process, all of those events. As we progress and move on into some of the other things that occurred, I'm sure that many, many more people, including myself, we're going to relate more to actually what happened. I actually had a great conversation with one of my great friends of mine, and yesterday we were talking about our time deployed to Iraq, and he was one of the ones that I talked about in a past episode that we talked about. If you look at it and go back and talking about some of the field events, the opportunities that we had, he is the one that I called Candy Apples. So if you're interested in finding that out, we'll go back there, take a look at some of the prior episodes and refresh your mind. Later on, we're working together to get together and actually have a recording of some storytelling time with me and him, and talking about our times in Iraq. But not only that, also some of the things that we discussed when we were just young Marines back in our time frame back in 5th Battalion, 11th Marines. So I look forward to sitting down with him and talking later on in the future. And I look forward to allowing you guys into a little bit of our world, our adventures, and things that we were able to accomplish and do during our time in the Marine Corps. So remember, our podcast is now available on all of the podcasting applications. A great big thank you from me, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week. This is the Gunny sounding Liberty Call.
I do solemnly swear. That I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.